Alright, we finally come to the position I hold, which is substance dualism. And this is part 5 of now 7, more in a moment on that, on the subject of mind versus brain. As a review, in part 1 I offered several important distinctions and definitions and examples of mental, and summarized my inductive argument as follows. Given 3 criteria of theory acceptance, basicality, naturalness, and epistemic value, and the nature of rival hypotheses, human consciousness is best explained by substance dualism. Having detailed those 3 criteria in my first video, I proceeded to critique 2 rival hypotheses of the mind-brain relation, specifically physicalism, which rejects the existence of the mental, and Ephiphenominalism, which suggests the mind supervenes or evolved via the brain. It was argued in part 2 through 4 that both views failed to explain the mind-body relation via 1. The criteria of theory acceptance, 2. The inherent problematic natures of both views, exemplified through objections, and 3. They fail comparatively, that is, to substance dualism's explanation, which I will now provide. Thus, we finally arrived to the 3rd and final view of the mind-brain, the ones that I'm going to look at, and that is substance dualism. Now, originally I was going to try to build and defend substance dualism in one video, but as I was recording the first 4 videos, I decided that since this is the position that I hold and defend, I would probably give it a little more time than 10 minutes. So I've decided to add an additional video and make this series 1 video longer. So when I say that it's a 6 video series at the beginning, I'm lying to you. I apologize about that. Couldn't see it coming. So what I'm going to do is, what I'm going to do is as follows. First, I'm going to detail the view of substance dualism and how mental and brain events correlate and offer some arguments as to why I think this is so. And second, I'm going to address some common objections made against substance dualism in the video after this one. So video 5 will be detailing the view, and part 6 will be defending the view. So on to the first part, which is this video of explaining the positions of substance dualism. Substance dualism, contrary to property dualism, Ephiphenominalism, holds that the mind is a real non-physical substance and not a property, distinct from the body with causal power and continues to exist when the physical body dies. Now, typically when a substance dualist refers to the word mind, this is interchangeable with other terms such as self, spirit, or soul. On this view, then, J.P. Moreland suggests that the mind, quote, appears to be a basic feature of the cosmos, and its origin at a finite level of persons is best explained by postulating a fundamental mind who gave finite minds being and design. Thus, the endowments which we possess point to the ultimate mind and ground of the mental, end quote. So in other words, the mental is a simple non-material feature of the world we live in that is not derivative of matter and is rooted in an ultimate mind. Now, it is important to note here before we go any further that the relation between the mind and the brain is best described as a correlation instead of a dependency via substance dualism, meaning the brain and mental states are often correlated with one another, causing certain events to happen to each other, but do not depend on one another as they are separate substances. So the point is not that there is a strong dependence of these states on one another, but that they are often correlated with one another. This is often confused when discussing objections against substance dualism, which will come out later. For now, when we applied 3 criteria of theory acceptance to substance dualism, we find that substance dualism as a hypothesis provides a superior explanation of the mental. First, via the criteria of basicality, an explanation is offered instead of a description, namely that the existence of consciousness or the mental can be explained via what Richard Swinburne calls a personal explanation versus a scientific explanation. Swinburne states, quote, in personal explanation, the occurrence of an event E is explained as brought about by a rational agent of person, P, having the intention, J, to bring about E. E is thus what we may term the result of an intentional action, A, performed by P, end quote. Thus, the rational agent God, who had the intention to bring about human minds, explains the existence of human minds via mediated action. In other words, human consciousness is the result of an intentional mediated action performed by God. Here, the what question is answered by God, and the why question is answered by the efficacious mediated and intentional action of creating said minds. So again, a personal explanation. Second, the mental or human consciousness is natural in light of the overall theory of which it is a part, specifically a feature of the non-naturalistic cosmos originating in a fundamental mind. According to substance dualism, then, its features of fundamental mind and substantive existent soul is more explicable and natural given theism. Thus, human consciousness is more natural to theism than naturalistic hypotheses. Hence, the criteria of naturalness is met. Since the theistic epistemic attitude, ideological account, and general ontology do not forbid non-material events, they are more natural to theism and substance dualism. Third and lastly, substance dualism contains certain epistemic values such as, but not limited to, being descriptively accurate, capable of solving internal and external conceptual problems, and its use of effective types of explanation. It could be also argued that substance dualism's account of the mental is quite simple, in contrast to physicalism or ephiphenominalism, but I will address this point in the next video. For our purposes right now, it is safe to say that substance dualism meets the criteria of basicality, naturalness, and epistemic value when accounted for via a theistic view. Now hopefully this establishes what substance dualism does and does not hold to, at least via the Cartesian sense. I'd like to end this first section by detailing a few of the reasons why I think substance dualism is persuasive as an account of the mental. The first has already been touched on, and I presented it in my argument against physicalism, which is the argument from the indiscernibility of identicals. In my view, this argument serves not only as a defeater of physicalism, but also serves as a justification for dualism in general. But in addition to the indiscernibility of identicals, there are additional arguments, two of which I will present here, which tend to convince me that substance dualism is the correct view, those being the argument from personal identity and libertarian agency. Now what I'm going to do here is simply outline these two arguments, but hope to expound them in the near future. So they're not going to be exhaustive presentations of the arguments, they're going to be quite simply outlines. The first is the argument from personal identity. Consider the following thought experiment. Suppose you have a boat that you take out regularly on fishing expeditions, and suppose further that the frame of the boat is made of wood and has a hitch on the back that holds a motor. Now let's say one day that you note that the boards need to be replaced, since you've been using it for years and years, and so you replace the boards. Here's the question. Is the boat the same boat prior to when you fixed it? Similarly, if a human person loses an arm, is he or she the same person? What if she loses half her brain? Or further, what if she loses her short-term memory secondary to a traumatic brain injury? Well, it would seem absurd to conclude that the individual who loses her arm, half her brain, or her short-term memory is not the same person. Thus, concisely, the argument from personal identity suggests that persons are not their bodies, since the loss of cells, arms, functions of the brain, or half their brain does not nullify the human's personal identity. This could be expounded a lot further, but suffice it to say that this is the second reason I find substance dualism compelling. It suggests that personal identity is not the body, it is the soul. The second argument is an argument from libertarian agency. Basically, the argument states that physical substances, meaning substances which are only physical based on their properties, parts, and capacities, physical substances do not exercise libertarian agency, but human beings do. Thus, human persons are not exclusively physical objects. Again, a very brief outline of the argument, but another reason why I find substance dualism to be convincing. Hopefully this is as detailed what substance dualism details. In the next video I will be defending and expounding objections made against substance dualism, so don't miss it.